Hello, I'm Sela Elisha Dasham, and the program is the Dailies on Echo Television International, where we keep you updated with what is happening from our papers this morning. And I have Rachel Tanzi, and together we will be looking at the papers. Good morning, Rachel.
Sarah.
How you doing?
I'm fine. How about you?
I'm great, thank you. We're live on Facebook and on YouTube. You can do well to drop your comments or your contribution on any story that is of interest to you, or recommendations on how the country can be better regarding the stories on the paper this morning. And we will be going straight into the papers and starting with the Daily Independent newspaper.
On Daily Independent, leading Nigeria is one of the hardest challenges in life, a statement coming from the past President Muhammadu Buhari. Federal government imposes 1,000 naira annual fee on motorists for proof of ownership certificate. The big story on the paper is El Kabir, solutions to ailing economy insecurity on the way, coming from Tinubu. Arrives Lagos, two tumultuous welcome by residents. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 28. We have IGP assures on security, tax AIGs, CPs on robust to responsive policing. NSCDC deploys 40,000 operatives nationwide. Nigeria can achieve full potential if we put aside differences, a statement coming from CAN. World Bank clarifies $800 million loan to Nigeria for fuel subsidy removal. The details can be found on page 6. UBA pioneers financial inclusivity for the visual impaired. You can find the writer says introduces UBA Braille account opening form. You can find the details on page 6. EU observers mission carpets INEC over conduct of 2023 poll, says commission betrayed public trust, lists 6 areas of improvement. We will study recommendations for implementation, INEC assures. At the downside of the paper, federal government to fast-track access to single-digit loans for MSMEs. You can find the details on page 6, and we have a picture story showing the president meeting a warm welcome. And that's all the news on the Daily Independent.
On Leadership newspaper, Bill wins Sierra Leone presidential election. You can find the international story on page 6 of the Leadership newspaper. And on Ekweremado's case, Ohaneze made UK envoy begs for leniency. You can find more of that story on page 6. Still on Leadership newspaper, federal government declares Wednesday, Thursday public holiday, which is today and tomorrow. World Bank approves $500 million loan for Nigeria women's empowerment. We hope the money gets to the women. And other stories still on leadership, Kano, Adamawa, Kogi, 5 others score high in budget transparency. This is a report. You can start reading on the front page and continue on page 7. Northern lawmakers insist on producing Senate leader. You can find detail of the story on page 7. We still have a fight over the majority and minority leader in the 10th House of Assembly. So you keep your fingers crossed and see how all of these will actually unfold. And we have Tinubu, governors assure Nigerians of better future with the rider. I'm working day and night to move nation forward, says the president. Pilgrims pray for peace and prosperity at Arifat. Police and SCDC raises security ban nationwide. We will recall last week there was an alert of looking at terrorists trying to attack or take advantage of the holiday. So for those who will be out, please do take care of yourself in as much as security operatives are also doing their best. Still on Leadership newspaper, APC finally fixed Kako's neck meeting for July 10 and 11. You can find that story on page 7. And on 2023 poll, INEC UE observers disagree over conduct of presidential election. And we have another story on flooding. FCTA declares Trademore Estate disaster zone. You can find detail on page 12. The picture story is actually showing people traveling for the Sadler break in Lagos yesterday. And that's all on the Leadership newspaper.
On this day newspaper, to mitigate related risks, CBN set limits for contactless payment transactions. PEC's daily cumulative threshold at 50,000 naira. transaction bond at 15,000 naira. Says higher payments to require verification, authorizations, and KYC. You can find the details on the front page and continue on page 40. Federal government to fast-track access to single-digit loans for MSMEs. This is a statement coming from the Vice President Shetima. You can find the details on page 6. EU presents final report on Nigeria's general election. At Salah, Tinubu greets Muslims, promises security and economic reforms. The writer flowing the story, Buhari seeks support for president as Atiku, governors, others canvass love and sacrifice. IG orders tight security nationwide. The big story on the paper coming from World Bank, 4 million more Nigerians pushed into poverty in first 6 months of 2023, 7.1 million more to join if subsidy removal is not properly managed, 6 new social compact to protect poor and most vulnerable. Savings from subsidy removal to surpass 11 trillion naira by 2025, explains fresh $500 million for Nigeria. OT Makinde Omokemde prefer perspectives on sustainable post-subsidy management. And we have the government stakeholders working on palliatives. You can find the details on page 40. We have a picture story. Tinubu returns to Lagos for Salah celebration. And that's all the news on this day newspaper.
Richard, I think it's important we talk about the big story for this day. World Bank saying that 4 million more Nigerians push into poverty in the first 6 months of 2023. And the first writer that said 7.1 million more to join if subsidy removal is not properly managed. And while you were reading, I just quickly did the arithmetic, and we're talking about 144.1 million Nigerians eventually living on the poverty line, or however we're going to put it. I think it's important that the government do something quick about this. The first paper I read, Rachel, we are looking at the fact that not the paper you read, where we saw federal government imposing 1,000 naira annual fee, and Lagos is actually starting this July. Now it seems that July is pregnant with so many things coming in July. We are having the back and forth right now. We don't really know if the electricity tariff will actually be increased, because yesterday we saw where the Abuja Electricity Distribution Company said that they are actually going backtracking on that, so they still have to consult with other stakeholders before that will be actually take effect. But still, people will ask, if you're backtracking, why did that story get to make it to the paper? Where we saw that Nigeria should buy in bulk as much as they can. It now make you look as if Nigerians have money somewhere piled up to buy that. Now, in July, a lot of things are going to happen. We still have the 8 weeks, which we are hoping that will be brought forward, where, looking at the minimum wage of workers will be increased. We still have workers that have not been paid for over 3 months. 5 months, 6 months. Some people as far as even 7 to a year. Are we going to talk about pensioners? A lot of things need to be tackled, and it sometimes may look like we're just sounding like a broken record, but we cannot stop overemphasizing all of these things, because it is important that we bring the attention of the government to all of these things, the underlying issues here. Okay, I'm happy the World Bank has finally clarified the $800 million to actually help Nigerians. But it's one thing for the money to be clarified, it's another thing for the money to get to the right people. It will reach, but then is it reaching the right people, Rachel? We've seen over and over money have been given and then it stops somewhere. Are we going to talk about the 177 Nigerians that were working before from the local governments we're having that was under the leadership of the former Minister of State Labor, Kiyamo? There were a lot of things that didn't go right. Some people didn't get their money eventually. Or are we going to look at even the empower that some people had to slash the money with some people? A lot of things seems not to be going well, and it really breaks my heart, the number of people. And we're seeing here, World Bank is saying 7.1 more will join. Something is not being done. I hope that the government is really, really taking this important. And I hope that this gets to the president, that he knows that a lot of things need to be done. I'm happy he's back home, so he begins to see what is really happening. It's one thing for you to be told, but it's another thing for you to see it with your 2 eyes, the hardship of Nigerians. Because let us not forget that when Nigerians get pushed to the wall, they will retaliate, and this retaliation is not beautiful at all. Let's not forget about the NSAS. Of course, lives was lost, but because something was not going right, and that was what pushed the masses. Labour did not need to talk about that. The masses had to do the talking, and the government listened to them. So I am hoping, honestly, that something will be done about it. It broke my heart to see this coming from the World Bank. It seems as if we are not doing our assignment as it should be. But we hope that with all of this, it's not too late to rectify all of these things. So we hope that the government will do what they are supposed to do to take care of the citizens in the country.
Sele, I honestly wish we had the national population census taking place already, because every number we have in Nigeria is just estimate. We don't know what our actual population is. What 200? Are we 200? Are we 200 million? Are we 230? Are we 250? We have no idea. Why I'm keen concerning our population is for us to know the actual exact number of people who are in poverty, living in poverty. Let's know, are we above 50%? Are we 60%? Are we 70%? Because when you look at our environment, we live in Nigeria, so we are eyewitnesses to what is going on. When you see things like small crime increasing, it's as a result of poverty. When you see petty theft increasing, is as a result of poverty. When you see the number of beggars on the street increasing, it means poverty. And over the years, I've seen a large increase in such, in petty theft, in crime, in people begging. You look at people that shouldn't be begging in the first place, begging. Are we going to talk about the displaced people because of insecurity? And let's know that it's not every insurgents that is being recorded on our paper. There are villages that have been raised and that have been long forgotten, that are displaced, and all of that. These are the statistics we need to know so that we truly can tell how many people are living in poverty. Because yes, the World Bank can be able to bring their estimate of 4 million more, and if full subsidy proceeds, we are looking at 7.1 million Nigerians. And we need to know, because when we look at things, we can't say that this is not true, because we can see the hardship and what people are facing in the country. And now it boils down to our government, Sele. It keeps boiling down to them, because in the end, we can only put our voice out there. You talked about the NSAS protest. The masses gave their voice out, and it was left for the government to do something about it. And even in that matter, we can say they didn't even handle it properly the way it should be. We are still having police brutality going on. It keeps taking new forms, it keeps taking new shape, and you wonder, how are we going to get the Nigerian government to listen to us and to do the right thing? Because when you look at things, we keep talking about policies and implementation. Subsidy removal shouldn't go hand with floating of the currency. It doesn't. These are two monetary policies, one economic policy and the other a monetary policy, that shouldn't work hand in hand. Because number one, we are still importing oil, so how would we be having our naira devaluing? We are still importing oil, and then subsidy is out, and then the naira currency is floating. And you wonder, do the government really know what they're doing? And the big question is, even if they know what they're doing, do they have the common Nigerian in mind? Because we are just seeing, it doesn't feel like they have us in mind as it is now. So it's not surprising if our poverty rate will keep growing, because every policy that has been coming, be it economic, business, or monetary, or even our fiscal policies, don't feel like they are in line to helping Nigerians improve the standard of living. I just keep seeing our standard of living depreciating, and we don't have full statistics to tell us how long. What is the short-term period? Are we talking about 6 months? Are we talking about 1 year? And if it is long time, how long are Nigerians expecting before things will normalize? We don't have this kind of things out there for us by the government. So we're just looking forward to seeing what the government would really do, drastic steps they would take to reduce the hardship and to make sure that we don't have 7 more million Nigerians joining those who are living in poverty already.
Honestly, Rachel, just like we said, it's left for the government to actually take all of this. Somebody said it jokingly, even though it's here, he said, if every country is to stand before God, and then the moment God just sees Nigeria, he'll start crying and he'll ask the country, what do you want? Because you have everything. It's just that we really do not have leaders that can actually utilize all of these resources that we have, even though we're not supposed to be having this number of people being poor, or the poverty rate going high and high every day. But we hope that something will be done about that. Let's take a look at the Daily Sun newspaper. Still on the Koremado's case, Ohanaeze hosts British envoy plead for leniency for the ex-senator. You can find detail on page 27. Akpabio's choice of 8 northern senators grumble with the writer accuses Senate president of snubbing region in selection of personal staff. You can find that on page 6. Leading Nigeria, one of the hardest life challenges coming from the former President Buhari. Drivers block Enugu State Road over drivers and passengers abduction. I think this is really something that should be the government should take up by looking into what can be done about adoption that's being, going on, not just in Enugu Road, but in other, states also. We've seen silent abduction being done. We hope something will be done. We have Igala Basa indigene protests at the defense headquarters allege ethnic cleansing. You can find detail on page 29. And on election, EU recommend reform of INEC and 5 other areas with the rider 101 violent incidents, 74 fatality recorded during campaigns. All of this story can be found on page 29. Court dismisses Premier Academy suit seeking to stop investigation into the death of a 14-year-old student. ACF urges arms of government to restore public confidence in rule of law. You can find detail on page 28. And Tinubu governors Atiku, Reps, Speaker, Fayemi, NILDS, DG hails Muslim faithfuls. High cost of RAM foodstuff transportation affects celebration. You can find detail of that story on page 8, 25, 28, and 29. And we have a story, the last story on the paper, that says fire raised NLC President Ajero's home in Lagos. You can find detail on page 4, and that's all on Daily Sun newspaper.
On Nigerian Tribune, fuel subsidy removal to fetch Nigeria 2 trillion naira in 2023, 11 trillion naira by 2025. A prediction coming from the World Bank says inflation sent 4 million into poverty. Previous mix of fixed monetary exchange rate policies, Naira redesign failed to deliver desired result, it adds. You can find the details on page 6. NANS demands 3-year validity for UTME results. And the big story on the paper, impunity, lack of transparency, March 2023 elections. Statement coming from the European Union says more than 100 campaign-related death, voters intimidation recorded during February 25th poll. Demands legal reforms to promote transparency, lists 6 areas of improvement. You can find the details on page 3. Federal government introduces 1,000 naira annual levy for vehicle proof of ownership certificate. Shake-up as an NAF redeploys 52 AVMs, 46 air commandos. You can find the details on page 29. Covenant University, UIOAU, Redeemers University, ABU, 46 others make impressive outing in new ranking. Our problems not insurmountable, Tinubu tells Nigerians at Salam. Leading Nigeria hardest challenge in life, a statement coming from Buhari, Akpabio, Abbas, governors, Atiku, others greet Muslims. Race for Senate leadership device stability group. APC NWC silent on zoning arrangement. Physics next meeting for July 11. You can find the details on page 3. We have a picture story showing a Muslims faithful in Hajj, and that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
On the Guardian newspaper, lobbyist storm Boridel for ministerial appointment. You can find detail on page 8. Akpabio, Atiku, Khan, others advocate peace sacrifice for national development. You can find on page 3. The big story for the Guardian, inflation and subsidy removal. 7.1 million Nigerians may become poorer as families face 5,700 naira monthly loss. And we have a column showing some of the key indicators, Nigeria's multidimensional poverty index by state in 2022. So you can do well to get inside, the paper to know some of the indicators, and also looking at the various poverty index by every state and see how your state is being affected, looking at food and other things. And we see that our GDP growth is 2.3%. Our exchange rate is 731 naira to a dollar, and then crude price, that's the price of oil, is now $73.93. So a lot of things are actually indicating why the World Bank came up with that. So you can do well to read detail of this particular story on page 6. Other story on the paper: beware kidnappers of students on the plow. So you can find detail on page 7. Motorists to pay 1,000 naira for proof of ownership certificate from July. You can find detail on page 5. And we see here where Katsina governor reject 100 rams from philanthropists. You can find detail of that story on page 30, and that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On the Punch newspaper, DSS alert military police deploy teams in prayer grounds. More multinational manufacturers planning to exit Nigeria, the statement coming from MAN. Naira devaluation, expect price hike, telcos tells Nigerians. You can find the details on page 26. The big story on the Punch newspaper: subsidy removal. Poor Nigerians will hit 101 million without palliatives, coming from World Bank. Governors, IMF back subsidy removal, demand cash transfer scheme for poor Nigerians. CBN measures fail to tackle inflation in first 6 months of 2023, World Bank insists. Tinubu Khan governors preach tolerance as Salah. You can find the details on page 39. And at the downside of the paper, federal government banks plan special ID cards for senior citizens. Lawless soldier shoots Ogun driver for parking beside company. APC caucus net meet July 10 and 11. You can find the details inside the paper on page 30. And that's all the news on the Punch newspaper.
On the Nation newspaper, EU observers report on result transmission unfair, says INEC. You can find detail on page 2. Vehicle owners to pay 1,000 naira yearly for proof of ownership. 9 Fayemi X8 among 21 commissioner designates. You can find detail on page 6. Travelers trap as rain destroy Bini Akure Highway. And we have still on the paper, still on Eid Kabir, our challenge is surmountable, Tinubu assures. President mark Eid in Lagos, governing Nigeria a tough job, says the former President Buhari. And we have Bio re-elected Sierra Leone's president. Khan, Akpabio, Abbas urge love, unity and prayer for Nigeria. Other stories still on the paper: single-digit interest loan coming for the MSMEs. World Bank project 2 trillion naira saving for federal government in 6 months from subsidy removal. Provide safety net for the poor and vulnerable, still coming from the World Bank. You can find detail of that story inside the paper. And downside, we have Navy rating beaten to death. That's really a sad one. We hope something will be done about that. And I think it's important for security agencies to really be going through some mental checkup, because the rate at which we are having abuse coming from the security agency is becoming unbecoming. We've seen the last paper where a lawless soldier just, shot a driver for parking, where there are better ways you could do. And you see the reason why sometimes we don't need a soldier to be dealing with security agents, because their training is actually different. But it's even more shameful, because even the police that were trained in a way that they could deal with civilians, we still find them acting the same way. And that was what brought about the brutality we spoke about earlier, about the hashtag #EndSARS, even though it was clothed with so many other things, not just the police brutality, but even bad governance amidst other things. But I think it's important something should be done about, the training of our security agency, regardless whether it's a custom, whether it's the Navy, the Air Force, the soldier, whoever. I think they need to be reoriented. Their training they need to have an orientation on what they need to do, how to treat certain situations. And I think that will go a long way for us not to keep having all of the stories making it to the paper. And we have the last story on the nation that say woman sell neighbor's child for 1.7 million naira. The poverty is really becoming very deep. The people begin to sell their own words and even selling their neighbor's own. You can find detail of that human angle story on page 6 of the Nation newspaper, and that's all on the Nation.
On New Telegraph, Nigeria can save 3.9 trillion naira this year from reforms coming from World Bank, federal government sourcing more funds for the poor. CBN sends transaction limit for contactless payment. You can find the details on page 25. We have Clark's accusations against Okowa at variance with reality. Rights violation, court finds ICPC 1.2 million naira, orders release of ex-JAM registrar. Ohaneze meets British envoy in Nigeria, seeks Ekweremadu's pardon. You can find the details on page 2. The big story on New Telegraph, Eid el-Kabir, Nigerians have almost lost hope. ACF cries out, calls on stakeholders to restore public confidence in governance. Tinubu enjoins Muslims to support the weak and vulnerable. Ex-President Akpabio, Abbas, Atiku, SGF, Musa, Obi, governors order facilitate Muslims as Kalu harps on nation unity. To Nigerians can achieve her full potential if you can find the details of all of these statements on page 2, 3, 4, 5, and 28. Lower crude oil output means less electricity, and ERC1 says no national grid collapse recorded in the Q4 of 2022. Don't be too insensitive. Consider compensation would be advised to governors. This is on demolition going on. You can find the details on page 2. Nigeria at high risk of anthrax importation. NCDC Agriculture Ministry is warning. We have federal government imposes annual fee on vehicles, proof of ownership certificate. EU election observers call INEC law on transparency. At the downside of the paper, we have a study that say ketone supplements worsen sports performance. You can find the details on page 31, and that's all the news on New Telegraph.
Before we continue with the paper review, we'd love to take a break at this moment. A lot of stories to chew, looking at the poverty rate that might increase, and that has even already increased, talking about over 4 million have increased in the last 6 months of this year. So a lot of stories are actually quite interesting. So we'd love to hear what your thoughts are, what your contribution are concerning any story that is of interest to you. When we come back from the break, please stay tuned.
If people are engaged with happenings in their country, they will better understand where the government is going wrong.
And once they do, they are better equipped to combat the problem as well as prefer solutions.
On Nigeria Now, every Monday to Friday at 3:30 p.m., we bring you
analysis of happenings in politics,
crime,
security,
and government policies.
Welcome back. It's still the Dailies on Echo Television, and we've been looking at various stories on the paper. We've seen possibly what the EU observers have to say about the 2023 presidential election and even the campaign, looking at voters' apathy, looking at even intimidation of voters amidst other, things that happened during the election. Also, we've seen that the World Bank have given the statistics of, the poverty rate that might increase if something is not being done about the first subsidy removal. These, among many other stories, are what we have been looking at on the paper. So we'd love to hear what your thoughts are concerning any story that is of interest to you by calling us on our number that is displayed on your screen. Please do remember to turn down the volume of your TV set when you call us, or you off the TV totally, because we really want to have a very clear, get to hear you clearly here, and other viewers will also love to hear what you have to say. I still have Rachel with me. Thanks so much, Rachel.
You're welcome.
All right, let's take a look at the first news before the calls come in. 2023 general election lack transparency. Coming from the EU, says trust in INEC severely damaged. You can find all of that inside the paper. And we have a Afenifere berate Ogun APC over attack on Benga Daniel. And on Salah celebration, Tinubu arrives Lagos from London. All right. And then next we have foster national unity and case against Tinubu. LP chief tells Atiku and Obi. And still on the tribunal, Sanwo-Olu, why voted with invalid voters card, says the weakness. Well, you find detail of the story inside the paper. The big story is still talking about the Eid-el-Kabir. I'm working day and night to address our challenges, Tinubu tell Nigerians. Leading Nigeria, one of the hardest challenges in life, coming from the former President Buhari, we've seen on other papers. Here also we've seen we will never negotiate with bandits for our government vows. You can find detail of that story inside the paper. Still on the Salah, Obi calls for spirit of oneness and testify prayers for new Nigeria. And we have on Ekweremadu's case, my brother suddenly disappeared, sibling of organ harvesting victim speaks. You can find all of that story inside the paper. And on the demolition, don't be too punitive, insensitive, or be urge governments. You can find all of that story inside. And on right violation, court fines ICPC 1.2 million naira, orders release of ex-JAM registrar. And that's all on the first newspaper. All right, let me take that next paper, which is the Nigerian News Direct. On petrol subsidy removal, poverty to rise in Nigeria without cash transfer program. This is coming from the World Bank. Afenifere Rise Ogun APC denies issuing any statement to support Benga Daniel. On vehicle verification, Lagos State Government FRS announced implementation of annual proof of ownership certificate. You can find that story on page 2. The big story for Nigerian News Direct, still on the Salah celebration, Nigeria economy, security problems surmountable, coming from Tinubu, with the writer makes case for the less privileged, arrives Lagos 29 days after inauguration for festival. As Buhari say, leading Nigeria one of the hardest challenges in life. Apabio orders solicit patient support for Tinubu's administration. You can find all that on page 3. And also UBA pioneers financial inclusivity for visually impaired, introduced UBA Burley account opening forum. And we've seen some of the, fiscally challenged people in the picture over here with the UBA stakeholders. You can find detail of the story inside the paper. And also still on Nigerian News Direct, we have elite ranking, Times Higher Education ranks Covenant University 7th in Africa. That's a great one that our educational sector is taking the front line. And also we have other stories here. The IGP Ebetoku directs CPs to reinforce security. You can find all that story inside, which you can find on page 2. And that's all on Nigerian News Direct.
On the Daily Times newspaper, Governor Oti begins probe of immediate past predecessor of Peso. As Salah commenced today, security beefed up nationwide. Acting IGP orders regular patrols, warns personnel against extortion, thousands of police, civil defense, DSS, and others deployed. Tinubu taxed Nigerians on tolerance and selflessness and love. We have demolition looming in Abuja, flood-ravaged Treadmill's estate. It's now disaster zone following frequent loss of lives coming from FCTA. At the downside of the paper, we have hope for small businesses as federal government to facilitate loans, says VP Shatima. You can find the details on page 2, and that's other news on Daily Times newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at the Nigerian Standard newspaper. Debt servicing rise to 1.24 trillion naira in the first quarter of 2023. That's a report. You can read detail of that on page 2. Federal government deploys mini grid to increase power in rural areas. You can find detail of that on page 2. Nigerians shouldn't be subjected to additional hardship, coming from Peter Obi. Reverse proposed plan for electricity tariff hike. You can find that story as well on page 10. The big story for the Nigerian Standard: World Bank approves fresh $500 million loan for the federal government to actually help drive women empowerment in Nigeria. And you can start reading the story on the front page and continue on page 2. World Bank taxed Tinubu to rebuild fiscal space. You can find detail of that story inside the paper. And even though looking at the issue of the electricity tariff that's already been, they said they're taking a backtrack. So that is not a problem. We're happy the federal government actually deployed the mini grid, especially about 50. Was what they did here, even though we could recall where they said that states should start looking for how to generate its electricity. But we've seen that federal government have actually come to the aid of state by, doing something about producing, some mini, transformers into the right areas. And I think that will go a long way to help Nigerians. Looking at the poverty, looking at the fact that because of the first subsidy removal, electricity is not really there, even though they're saying that there was no power grid in the last quarter. I'm trying to backtrack myself also to remember what actually happened in the last quarter of last year. But regardless of whatever it is, we hope that, just like we keep saying, it's not about saying whether you are reversing or not. The problem here is, have you improved on your servicing? Have you improved on your distribution? Have you improved in so many other things? We do not want to hear flimsy excuses coming from the power sector anymore, such as there was no water in the dam. As far as I'm concerned, that is a very flimsy excuse. I shouldn't even hold water at the end of the day. We hope to hear something more intelligent coming from the power distribution companies, that they can do something. And let us hope that we'll begin to see light, so that we don't feel the impact of the first subsidy that much, looking at the price of fuel increasing on a daily basis. So we hope something will be done about that.
Stella, just imagine a situation if there was consistent supply of grids in local government areas, consistently year in, year out, gradually one step or the other. I believe even if we don't have full 100% power supply in Nigeria, we should be there over 50 to 60% in the country. But I keep saying that we lack consistency in our governance. We wait till there is a problem coming up, then we make certain things available, whereas this is not how growth should be. It should be deliberate and consistent every day, because you are heading towards something. You don't have to wait till when there is a hike, there is a hike in electricity tariff. You don't have to wait until until you sense danger ahead or a problem ahead before you start doing the things which on a normal level you should have been doing in the past years, and that would be the thing that will facilitate growth in the country. So as I keep saying, people have been sleeping on their jobs, and the more we see stories unfold on the papers, the more we see things come to the surface, the more we realize that we've been having a government that have not been deliberate about growth, because the things that should be done on a normal basis, the things that it's meant to be in place, are not being in place until when a problem or a situation arises. Then you see us doing what should have been done years ago. So I just hope we keep waking up and not waiting until there's a problem before we do the needful in this country.
I hope to hear a statement coming about, even though I know we've been managing, especially when it comes to like rationing the light, because it's not consistent as it should be. And they're even talking about when we're supposed to be enjoying about 5,000 megawatts, we're not enjoying that. And they're even still talking about the subsidy for power, because of course they is supposed to subsidize all of this thing, about 50 million or so. that is like annually, but it's really a lot of things are really very, skippy. Some things are missing, but I just hope that I'll be able to fix all of this thing. Just like you said, let Nigerians enjoy. We're in the 21st century. We're not supposed to be talking about not having enough light. Where other developed countries are talking about going into solar, going into water, using so many means of energy. We are still struggling with this. So I just believe that even though it's baby steps, but I'm truly hoping that we'll get it right someday, somehow. And that's all on the Nigerian Standard newspaper.
On Sweet Crude Report, host communities petition EFCC over divers or 1 trillion naira oil derivation fund. Nigeria owe traders $3 billion for oil swap development may complicate Tinubu's reforms. Another oil spill from Shell facility rocks Rivers community. Oil producing states get 22.86 billion naira derivation revenue in May. You can find the details on the front page and continue on page 2. And that's all the news on Sweet Crude Reports.
All right, let's take a look at the Nature newspaper. Coca-Cola modifies bottle to combat plastic waste pollution, and I'm happy. I hope we begin to see other companies doing the same, so we can keep it. I remember when we spoke about this, talking about the plastic pollution, and then how we can recycle and other ways to actually reduce the pollution, because you need to see some of our drainages, you need to see some of our rivers full of plastic. So I hope we'll be able to do something. I'm happy Coca-Cola have taken that. I hope other companies will do the same thing. And we have the big story for the Nature News. Lagos Blue Line rail system to begin operations in August. Red line testing to commence. You can find detail of that story on page 3. Shell pipeline oil spill devastate farmland and river, threatening livelihoods in Niger Delta. This really is sad one. We hope that they pay for all of the spills, compensate the people that are driven by this river, line areas, because this thing is really, really doing a lot of hazard. We no longer have our fishes in the river because of the oil spillage. A lot of farmlands, you can't even plant there. So we hope Shell do something about all of those things. You can find detail on page 5. While we have Excel project should touch every state, coming from Governor Sule of Nasarawa State. School children encouraged to participate in agriculture for food security. I think we all went through that, Rachel, in one way or the other. Where I remember back then in secondary school, everybody had a reach to himself, where you get to plan and then you get to harvest, you water and monitor that. I think we will continue abiding this, starting from the primary school. Remember, then you bring a flower pot to actually plant, just to cultivate the habit. And I think it's a good thing that we have that being introduced back into our school systems again. Still on Nature News, we have the WFP pledges $2.56 billion to fight food insecurity and malnutrition in Nigeria. You can find that story on page 6. Federal government commits to Operation Feed Yourself, promote food production at household level. You can find on page 11. We have benefit for sightings. You can find that story on page 15. And downside, we also have Okocha dazzled in Ronaldo's leagues match. You can find detail of that for the sport lovers on page 21. And that's all on Nature newspaper.
On Business Day newspaper, Nigeria's new due diligence rules draw mixed feelings. CBN NSA exposed in $660 million dark dealings. You can start with the details on the front page and find more details on page 30. Indian government goes after fugitive brothers bailing in Nigeria. World Bank, IMF, others back Tinubu's economic reforms. UBA launches account to ease banking for the blind. The details can be found on page 20. That's all the news on Business Day newspaper.
All right, on Sporting Sun newspaper, Liverpool ready to splash €258 million on Mbappe. You can find that story inside the paper. We have Ronaldo top 10 highest paid players in Saudi list. You can do well to take a look at that carefully. West Ham rejects City opening bid for Declan Rice. And we also have Neymar receives offer from Saudi Arabia. Tottenham reject Bayer opening €65 million bid for Kane. Spurs prepare €40 million bid for Madison. And we also have Obioma wins Nichelle Booth at 2022-2023 MPFL top scorer. And also other story here, we have man breaks world record for 100 meter sprint in high heels. Wow, that's a great one. You can find detail of the story inside the paper. Inter said 43 million euro for Onana. And we have Chelsea agrees terms with C2. You can find that story also on page 2. We have a lot of, column for our sport lovers, so you can do well to actually find which of your club, whatever sports story that is of interest to you on the front page and more inside the paper. And that's how far we can go on the program this morning. Thanks so much, Rachel, for doing this with me. Thank you so much to our, the crew members. Thank you to our supporters. Thank you to the viewers. Thank you to everybody. Please do remember to be safe today wherever you are. Be very, very careful and watch out for anything. Do have a blessed day ahead.